And I remember being in the chapel each morning for meditation, taking off my shoes, my feet smelling. And then I would sit next to Father Gabriel in the back row, and I fell asleep both mornings I was here, because that's one of my charisms. There at the heart of the church, I will fall asleep.
I'm Father Mark Mary.
And I'm Father Gregory Pine.
I'm a Franciscan Friar of the Renewal.
And I am a Dominican Friar of the province of St. Joseph.
And this is Ascension Presents. Good to have you back, Father Gregory.
Thanks. Good to be here.
It makes my job easy.
Hey, I'm delighted to make your job easy.
And again, invited Father Gregory to talk about smart things that it's helpful to know, hear from about somebody who knows stuff.
What I lack in smarts, I make up for in bluff confidence. So if it's not right, at least it sounds cool.
So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Does it matter? Does it matter where I get my coffee? How do I, like, people are talking about that it makes difference. Help me navigate that question.
I think that's a great question. So my general approach to questions like this, questions in general, is that it all matters. Why would I say that it all matters? Well, is that because we should apply an incredible amount of moral pressure for each of our decisions so that we are crippled at the prospect of doing something wrong? No. No, you saw him.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
He was already shaking his head. No.
I knew the answer to that
He knew
question.
where that was going. No, it's because what we do is, it's purposeful, and it's, as a result of which, it has a significance or a meaning which bears on eternity. So how do we go about then determining whether or not our acts are good? And I think that you have probably heard of the conversation of moral cooperation or cooperation in evil, whether the acts that we contribute to the acts of others, so like the assistance that we give to others, can be culpable, or maybe more basically can lead us away from the Lord. Okay, so let's do a couple of things. Let's talk about moral acts to begin with, just basic sketch, basic outline, and then talk about how you evaluate whether or not they are good. And then let's talk about what it means to cooperate in the act of another individual. And then we can do a little evaluation on, when those are good, when those are bad, and then some tips, tricks, practicals for going forward. So, will we make it to all of those things in the allotted time? Let's find out. Let's go. So first, a moral act. When people in the life of the church describe moral acts, they identify three main features or elements. And this is the most jargony that we will get the entire time that we are here together. You ready for this? Here we go. So an act has an object, all right? So that's like the thing that you are doing. An act also has an end. That is the reason for which, the ultimate reason for which you are doing the thing. And then an act has circumstances. So that'd be like the who, when, where, the pertinent considerations for evaluating the act in its entirety or in its wholeness. All right? So let's take an example. Let's say that the two of us, at the end of this video, we go out for a walk, okay? Let's say that the walk is for the purpose of buying pizza at a local pizza shop. So that way I can have good pizza for the first time in a long time, all right? How would we describe that act, or what is it going on? All right, so if you were just to catch like a snapshot of us, what are we doing? We're taking a walk, okay? What are we doing more specifically? We're going to get pizza. To what end? Well, to satisfy our hunger, fortify our bodies, so that we can record more videos. Hopefully that is not the ultimate end, because if the videos aren't for the glory of God, then they're stupid and you should stop watching like pronto. Unlike it 1,000 times, all right? And then what are the pertinent circumstances? Well, it's snowy outside and this guy wears sandals, so if I were really generous and considerate, I'd be like, yeah, we can just grab a bite to eat here, but I'm not. No, I prefer to eat delicious New York City pizza. Somebody be like, put on your sandals and let's get your toes cold, right? So these are all different things to take into account. Like, what is it that's being done? And in the case of this moral act, it's morally praiseworthy because pizza's delicious, bodies ought to be built up for the glory of God, and videos ought to be recorded provided that they are worth watching. If they're not, then just scrap the whole thing, okay? And, do I think that he can hang tough with a couple of minutes of cold feet? I absolutely do. I'm going to ask that sacrifice of him in a couple minutes, all right? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about an act, all right, a moral act. How do you assess whether or not it's good or bad? Well, in order for it to be good, it all has to be good, okay? So it's got to be a good thing, it's got to be to a good end, and all of the different circumstances should be lined up just so, all right? So if he were like really, really sick, or if he found it very, very difficult to walk and I were to ask these things, then that would change the nature of the act, all right? That might make it a bad thing, all right? Because all it takes is one bad thing to make it a bad act, okay? So that's basically what we're describing when we say this is a moral act, all right? This is how you evaluate whether or not it's good or bad. And now we're going to introduce the consideration of cooperation. So cooperate, you've heard the word before. You are a co-operator. So you're working with the person who is performing the moral act, all right? And now a lot of times when we assess cooperation, we're assessing bad actions, and we're trying to determine how close you are to the bad action and how much you contribute to the bad action. Because at a certain point, if you contribute to the bad action in a way that, you know, without your help, it wouldn't have come off, or you just find yourself so enmeshed or so implicated that you really can't be excused, you know, you can't be pardoned, then you know, that could be sinful, and in certain cases, gravely sinful. So let's take an example of abortion, okay? So obviously, the gravest moral evil in terms of terrible, right? So imperiling the dignity of human life, killing human babies, and at such like a widespread scope or whatever. I don't know what the exact word that I'm trying to use is, but it's something like that, right? It's done so prevalently that we're like dulled to its horror, okay? You can imagine people contributing to this act in different ways. So you have the abortion doctor, okay? So he's doing the thing, right? He's performing the abortion. And regardless of what his end is, right, he's doing the bad thing. And as a result of which, he is the bad actor, the bad operator, all right? So it might be the case that he's just doing it to make money. It might be the case that he finds abortion morally repugnant, but he has been forced by the state, depending on his, you know, local jurisdiction, to perform the action. Who knows, right? But if you're doing the bad thing, you know, you're in neck deep. Now think about the nurse, okay? Let's say that the nurse had a job in, you know, like Lenox Hill Hospital or whatever it was, but then they turned the whole hospital into a COVID ward, and she had someone at home, and as a result of which, you know, like someone at home whom she had to take care of who was immunocompromised, and so she had to find a new spot, and the only thing that she could find was working for this abortion doctor, all right? She needs to make the money to support her family, and as a result of which, she's in a real moral bind, all right? You might be inclined to think like, maybe. But no, because she's so close to the act, she's contributing to the act, that we would have to describe her action as, you know, gravely sinful. Because describing an act it's not a matter of mental gymnastics. Like, you could see it from this perspective, or you could see it from that perspective, right? So how we think about it is one consideration, and what is done is another consideration, but we have to bring those both to bear. You're like, all right, Father Gregory, that was just about the vaguest way that you could have described something under the sun. Be more clear, be more precise. I was hoping you would ask. Okay, here we go. Our human reason shapes an act, all right? So the end that I have in mind makes a real contribution, okay? But also, the thing that I do shapes an act, all right? So we're not just like living in science fiction land where whatever I imagine makes it so that it conforms to my standard of imagining. No. Okay, so if it's an act of abortion, and if the nurse is handing forceps or is handing whatever instruments, okay, she's helping. She is genuinely contributing to this act regardless of how repugnant she finds it, okay? All right, let's take it at another level of remove. Think about, you know, like the janitor. And here you start getting into considerations of what people call formal versus material cooperation, okay? So in formal cooperation, you're like, wait a second, I thought you said that the moral act piece was going to be the most jargony. And here you are talking about formal and material cooperation. This one's actually pretty straightforward, so don't worry about it. Okay. So with formal cooperation, you are joined to the actor in such a way that you share his or her end, all right? Or you're performing an act which contributes really to the attaining of that end in a pretty thick way, in a pretty substantial way. So that would be like the case of the nurse, all right? She is a formal cooperator. So even though she doesn't share the same end as the doctor, she's still doing the things which contribute substantially or thickly to that end, and as a result of which, she's formally cooperating. Now, the janitor who works at the Planned Parenthood where the abortion is performed, is he formally cooperating? Well, no, right? Presumably he knows where he is working, and he may have thoughts about the licety or the morality of abortion, but he's not contributing to the act in the same way that the nurse would be, for instance. He's not directly bearing on it. He's keeping the facilities clean, okay? But here, then, we introduce considerations of how close, you know, is your material cooperation, okay? So the material cooperation is just a matter of, you know, you like help in some way, right? You provide for a clean facility, right? Or, you know, you can envision other ways in which this gets spun out. But how close are you to the thing? Are you providing the type of service without which they couldn't do the action? If the answer to that is yes, then that too is out of bounds. That too would be called, you know, like close material cooperation or proximate material cooperation. And then there's what's called remote material cooperation. And that means like, you might give money that gets filtered to this thing by, kind of a circuitous route, but you don't want the thing. You're not even necessarily cognizant of the fact that your money is going to that. And so, yes, you're not culpable, but it's still an evil thing. You're still contributing to it, but you yourself are not blameworthy as a result. Okay, here, last consideration. You might think, like, to this point, we've basically been assessing these matters on what is forbidden and what is permitted. And so far we've said, like, definitely not doing a bad thing, definitely not formal cooperation with a bad thing, definitely not, close or what's called proximate material cooperation with a bad thing, but remote cooperation with a bad thing, it's permissible. But the Christian life is not to be summarized by what is permitted and what is forbidden, right? It's not as if the apostle said, like, Jesus, you alone have knowledge of what is permitted and forbidden. Therefore, we will follow you until our last breath. They didn't say that. They said, you have the words of everlasting life. For them, it was a matter of, we have encountered someone who is unlike anyone else whom we have encountered. And as a result of which our lives are radically changed. They're set about a new trajectory. Pope Benedict at the beginning of Deus Caritas Es says, being Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty ideal, right? It's not the result of determining what's permitted and what's forbidden. It's the result of an encounter with a person, right, who imparts to life a new horizon and a decisive direction. Okay, so what we are about is cultivating friendship with the Lord Jesus Christ and safeguarding the Trinitarian communion which comes about through his friendship. And so when it comes to considerations of, like, how close am I to this thing and how close ought I to be, I don't think that we can just say, yeah, like, buy your coffee from wherever you darn well please, because it doesn't matter that much. Because it does, right? Because it ultimately does. And if we remain close to evil things, even at a distance, then it has a way of changing our sensibilities and making us so that we are deadened to the spiritual realities which are otherwise available to those who would look and attend. So while it is permissible, we should be, cautious. We should be motivated to distance ourselves from those types of things. Buying your coffee from a place where, it might not taste the same, right? But it's better. And I think that the standard for making coffee should be excellent coffee, right? I don't think that you're like, you should buy coffee from places where the baristas have good intentions. It's like, if we were to use that logic, then Christian movies would be good, but a lot of Christian movies are not good, okay? The standard of the thing is the thing should be good, right? But we have to contribute to, local folks who are going to make good coffee shops where they make delicious coffee and they contribute to worthy causes, but that culture doesn't change unless we care, right? Unless we think that our actions actually have weight and mean something, they signify something that actually, matters for eternity. So that is a basic thumbnail sketch of what it means to perform a moral act, how you assess whether it is good or evil, what then it means to cooperate with a moral act, how you assess whether that is good or evil, but ultimately the setting in which our moral lives unfold with this horizon of heaven.
Yeah, great. And I think the one extra consideration, as we kind of talked about before, is just this idea that, like, materially cooperating in evil, particularly in evil of abortion. So if I know that where I buy coffee, right, some of that money goes to Planned Parenthood. And we're saying, like, okay, so maybe you're not morally culpable, right? You're not sharing in it in a proximate way. What's it called? Proximate material cooperation. You're not doing that. But cooperating in evil is always bad. And the reality is that, like, what's different in your life by the fact that, for example, that abortion is a reality and is a government-sanctioned reality, right? Like, does it just affect the fact how you vote every 4 years, or maybe you go to the March for Life or something like that? But I think having substantial adjustments in your life, behavioral adjustments, because of that. For example, I'm going to go to this place to get coffee instead of this place. I think it's really important, and it helps us to keep back some of the desensitization.
Yeah.
Is that a word?
Yeah. I think so.
But I mean, we're just making up words anyway, so I don't care.
It's all up for grabs.
So while it might be permissible, I think we can aim for a higher good as well, and so that'd be my thought, my recommendation.
Amen. Hallelujah.
All right. Thank you.
Totes.
Cool. We'll see you next week. For more from Father Gregory, check out Godsplaining. For more from me, check out Habits for Holiness, new book, and Poco Poco podcast with the friars. See you next week. Poco Poco, little by little, vamos a llegar. We're going to make it.